Hi everyone. We are going to finish today reading where we left off the second half of Diagon Alley. Welcome, said Hagrid, to Diagon Alley. He grinned at Harry's amazement. They stepped through the archway. Harry looked quickly over his shoulder and saw the archway shrink instantly back into the solid wall. The sun shone brightly on a stack of cauldrons outside the nearest shop. Cauldrons, all sizes, copper, brass, pewter, self-stirring, collapsible, a sign said, hanging over them. Yeah, you'll be needing one, said Hagrid, but we gotta get your money first. Harry wished he had about 8 more eyes. He turned his head in every direction as they walked up the street, trying to look at everything at once. The shops, the things outside them, the people doing their shopping. A plump woman outside an apothecary was shaking her head as they passed, saying, "Dragon liver, 16 sickles, they're mad." A low, soft hooting came from a dark shop with a sign saying, "Ilops, Alimporium, Tawny, Screech, Barn, Brown, and Snowy." Several boys of about Harry's age had their noses pressed against a window with broomsticks in it. "Look," Harry heard one of them say, "the new Nimbus 2000. Fastest ever." There were shops selling robes, shops selling telescopes and strange silver instruments Harry had never seen before, windows stacked with barrels of bat spleens and eel eyes, tottering piles of spell books, quills and rolls of parchment, potion bottles, globes of the moon. "Gringotts," said Hagrid. They had reached a snowy white building which towered over the little shops. Standing beside its burnished bronze doors, wearing a uniform of scarlet and gold was... "Yeah, that's a goblin," said Hagrid quietly. As they walked up the white stone steps toward him, the goblin was about a head shorter than Harry. He had a swarthy, clever face, a pointed beard, and Harry noticed very long fingers and feet. He bowed as they walked inside. Now they were facing a second pair of doors, silver this time, with the words engraved upon them, "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take but do not earn must pay more dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned. Beware of finding more than treasure there." "Like I said, you'd be mad to try and rob it," said Hagrid. A pair of goblins bowed them through the silver doors, and they were in a vast marble hall. About 100 more goblins were sitting high on stools on a long counter, scribbling in large ledgers, weighing coins of brass scales, examining precious stones through eyeglasses. There were too many doors to count leading off the hall, and yet more goblins were showing people in and out of these doors. Hagrid and Harry made for the counter. "Morning," said Hagrid to a free goblin. "We've come to take some money out of Mr. Potter's safe." "You have his key, sir?" "Got it somewhere," said Hagrid, and he started emptying his pockets onto the counter, scattering a handful of moldy dog biscuits over the goblin's book of numbers. The goblin wrinkled his nose. Harry watched the goblin on their right, weighing a pile of rubies as big as glowing coals. "Got it," said Hagrid at last, holding up a tiny golden key. The goblin looked at it closely. "That seems to be in order." "Ah, I've also got a letter here from Professor Dumbledore," said Hagrid, importantly, throwing out his chest. "It's about the you-know-what in Vault 713. The goblin read the letter carefully. "Very well," he said, handing it back to Hagrid. "I will have someone take you down to both vaults. Griphook." Griphook was yet another goblin. Once Hagrid had crammed all the dog biscuits back into his pockets, he and Harry followed Griphook toward one of the doors leading off the hall. "What's the you-know-what in Vault 713? asked Harry. "Can't tell you that," said Hagrid, mysteriously. "Very secret. Hogwarts business. Dumbledore's trusted me. More'n my job's worth to tell you that." Griphook held the door open for them. Harry, who who had expected more marble, was surprised when they were in a narrow stone passageway lit with flaming torches. It sloped steeply downward, and there were little railway tracks on the floor. Griphook whistled, and a small cart came hurtling up the tracks toward them. They climbed in, Hagrid with some difficulty, and they were off. At first they just hurled through the maze of twisting passages. Harry tried to remember left, right, left, middle, fork, right, left, but it was impossible. The rattling cart seemed to know its own way because Griphook wasn't steering. Harry's eyes stung as the cold air rushed past them, but he kept them wide open. Once he thought he saw a burst of fire at the end of a passage and twisted around to see if it was a dragon, but too late. They plunged even deeper, passing an underground lake where huge stalactites and stalagmites grew from floor to ceiling. "I never know," Harry called over to Hagrid over the noisy cart. "What's the difference between a stalagmite and a stalactite?" "Stalagmite's got an M in it," said Hagrid. "And don't ask me questions just now. I think I'm going to be sick." He did look very green, and when the cart stopped at last beside a small door in the passageway, Hagrid got out and had to lean over to the wall to stop his knees from trembling. Griphook unlocked the door. A lot of green smoke came billowing out, and as it cleared, Harry gasped. Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little bronze nuts. "All yours," smiled Hagrid. "All Harry's." It was incredible. The Dursleys couldn't have known about this, or they'd have had it from him faster than blinking. How often had they complained how much Harry cost them to keep? And all this time there had been a small fortune belonging to him buried underneath London. Hagrid helped Harry pile some of it into a bag. "The gold ones are galleons," he explained. 17 silver sickles to a galleon, and 29 nuts to a sickle. It's easy enough." "Right, and that should be enough for now. That should be enough for a couple of terms. We'll get the rest saved for you." He turned to Griphook. "Vault 713 now, please, and can we go more slowly?" "One speed only," said Griphook. They were going even deeper now and gathering speed. The air became colder and colder as they hurled right around tight corners. They were rattling over an underground ravine, and Harry leaned over the side to try and see what was down at the dark bottom, but Hagrid groaned and pulled him back by the scruff of his neck. Vault 713 had no keyhole. "Stand back," said Griphook importantly. He stroked the door gently with one of his long fingers, and it simply melted away. "If anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried that, they'd be sucked in through the door and trapped in there," said Griphook. "How often do they check to see if anyone's inside?" asked Harry. "Oh, about once every 10 years, said Griphook, with a rather nasty grin. Something really extraordinary had to be inside this top security vault. Harry was sure, and he leaned forward eagerly, expecting to see fabulous jewels at the very least. But at first, he thought it was empty. Then he noticed a grubby little package wrapped in brown paper lying on the floor. Hagrid picked it up and tucked it deep inside his coat. Harry longed to know what was in it, but he knew better than to ask. "Come on, back in this infernal cart, and don't talk to me on the way back. It's best if I keep my mouth shut," said Hagrid. One wild cart ride later, they stood blinking in the sunlight outside Gringotts. Harry didn't know where to run first now that he had a full bag of money. He didn't have to know how many galleons there were to a pound to know that he was holding more money than he had ever had in his whole life. More money than even Dudley had ever had. "Might as well get your uniform," said Hagrid, nodding toward Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. "Listen, Harry, would you mind if I slipped off for a pick-me-up in the leaky cauldron? I hate them Gringotts carts." He did still look a bit sick, so Harry entered Madame Malkin's shop alone, feeling nervous. Madame Malkin was a squat, smiling witch dressed all in mauve. "Hogwarts, dear," she said when Harry started to speak. "Got the lot here. Another young man being fitted up just now, in fact." In the back of the shop, a boy with a pale, pointy face was standing on a footstool while a second witch pinned up his long black robes. Madame Malkin stood Harry on a stool next to him, slipped a long robe over his head, and began to pin it to the right length. "Hello," said the boy. "Hogwarts too?" "Yes," said Harry. "My father's next door buying my books, and Mother's up the street looking at wands," said the boy. He had a bored, drawling voice. "Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully Father into getting me one. I'll smuggle it in somehow." Harry was strongly reminded of Dudley. "Have you got your own broom?" the boy went on. "No," said Harry. "Play Quidditch at all?" "No," said Harry again, wondering what on earth Quidditch could be. "I do. Father says it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house, and I must say I agree. Know what house you'll be in yet?" "No," said Harry, feeling more stupid by the minute. "Well, no one really knows until they get there, do they? But I know I'll be in Slytherin. All our family have been. Imagine being in Hufflepuff. I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" Said Harry, wishing he could say something a bit more interesting. "I say, look at that man," said the boy, suddenly nodding toward the front window. Hagrid was standing there, grinning at Harry and pointing at two large ice creams to show he couldn't come in. "That's Hagrid," said Harry, pleased to know something the boy didn't. "He works at Hogwarts." "Oh," said the boy, "I've heard of him. He's a sort of servant, isn't he?" "He's the gameskeeper," said Harry. He was liking the boy less and less every second. "Yes, exactly. I heard he's sort of a savage. Lives in a hut on the school grounds, and every now and then he gets drunk and tries to do magic, and ends up setting fire to his bed." "I think he's brilliant," said Harry coldly. "Do you?" said the boy, with a slight sneer. "Why is he with you? Where are your parents?" "They're dead," said Harry shortly. He didn't feel much like going into the matter with the boy. "Oh, sorry," said the other, not sounding sorry at all. "But they were our kind, weren't they?" "They were a witch and wizard, if that's what you mean." "I really don't think they should let the other sort in, do you? They're just not the same. They've never been brought up to know our ways. Some of them have never even heard of Hogwarts until they get the letter. Imagine. I think they should keep it in the old wizarding families. What's your surname, anyway?" But before Harry could answer, Madame Malkin said, "That's you done, my dear," and Harry, not sorry for an excuse to stop talking to the boy, hopped down from the footstool. "Well, I'll see you at Hogwarts, I suppose," said the drawing boy. Harry was rather quiet as he ate his ice cream Hagrid had brought him, chocolate and raspberry with chopped nuts. "What's up?" said Hagrid. "Nothing," Harry lied. They stopped to buy parchment and quills. Harry cheered up a bit when he found a bottle of ink that changed color as you wrote. When they had left the shop, he said, "Hagrid, what's Quidditch?" "Blimey, Harry, I keep forgetting how little you know, not knowing about Quidditch." "Don't make me feel worse," said Harry. He told Hagrid about the pale boy and Madame Malkin's, and he said people from Muggle families shouldn't even be allowed in. "You're not from a Muggle family, and if he'd known who you were, he's grown up knowing your name. If his parents are wizarding folk, you saw him in the leaky cauldron. Anyway, what does he know about it? Some of the best I ever saw were the only ones with magic in them were from a long line of Muggles. Look at your mom. Look at what she had for a sister." "So, what is Quidditch?" "It's our sport. Wizard sport. It's like football in the Muggle world. Everyone follows Quidditch, played up in the air on broomsticks, and there are 4 balls. Sorta hard to explain the rules." And what are Slytherin and Hufflepuff? Schoolhouses, there's 4. Everyone said Hufflepuff are a lot of duffers, but I bet I'm in Hufflepuff, said Harry gloomily. Better Hufflepuff than Slytherin, said Hagrid darkly. There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin. You know who was one. Sorry, you know who was at Hogwarts? Years and years ago, said Hagrid. They bought Harry's school books in a shop called Flourish and Blots, where the shelves were stacked to the ceiling with books as large as paving stones, bound in leather, books the size of postage stamps and covers of silk, books full of peculiar symbols, and a few books with nothing in them at all. Even Dudley, who never read anything, would have been wild to get his hands on some of these. Hagrid almost had to drag Harry away from curses, counter-curses, bewitch your friends and befuddle your enemies with the latest revenges, hair loss, jelly legs, tongue-tying, and much, much more, by Professor Vindicus Viridian. I was trying to find out how to curse Dudley. I'm not saying that's not a good idea, but you're not supposed to use magic in the Muggle world except in very special circumstances, said Hagrid. And anyway, you couldn't work any of them curses yet. You'll need a lot more studying to get to that level. Hagrid wouldn't let Harry buy a solid gold cauldron either. It says pewter on your list. But they got a nice set of scales for weighing potion ingredients and a collapsible brass telescope. Then they visited the apothecary, which was fascinating enough to make up for its horrible smell, a mixture of bad eggs and rotted cabbages. Barrels of slimy stuff stood on the floor, jars of herbs, dried roots, and bright powders lined the walls, bundles of feathers, strings of fangs, and snarled claws hung from the ceiling. While Hagrid asked the man behind the counter for a supply of some basic potion ingredients for Harry, Harry himself examined silver unicorn horns at 21 galleons each and minuscule glittery black beetle eyes, 5 nuts a scoop. Outside the apothecary, Hagrid checked Harry's list again. Just your wand left. Oh yeah, and I haven't got you a birthday present. Harry felt himself go red. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. Tell you what, I'll get your animal. Not a toad. Toads went out of fashion years ago. You'd be laughed at. And I don't like cats. They make me sneeze. I'll get you an owl. All the kids want owls. They are deadly useful. Carry your post and everything. 20 minutes later, they left Ilop's Owl Emporium, which had been dark and full of rustling and flickering, jewel-bright eyes. Harry now carried a large cage which held a beautiful snowy owl. Fast asleep, her head under her wing, he couldn't stop stammering his thanks, sounding just like Professor Quirrell. Don't mention it, said Hagrid gruffly. Don't expect you've had a lot of presents from them Dursleys. Just Ollivanders left now. Only place for wands. Ollivanders, and you gotta have the best wand. A magic wand. This was what Harry had really been looking forward to. The last shop was narrow and shabby. Peeling gold letters over the door read, Ollivanders, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. A single wand lay on a faded purple cushion in the dusty window. A tinkling bell rang somewhere in the depths of the shop as they stepped inside. It was a tiny place, except for a single spindly chair which Hagrid sat on to wait. Harry felt strangely as though he had entered a very strict library. He swallowed a lot of his new questions which had just occurred to him and looked instead at the thousands of narrow boxes piled neatly right up to the ceiling. For some reason, the back of his neck prickled. The very dust and silence in here seemed to tingle with some secret magic. Good afternoon, said a soft voice. Harry jumped. Hagrid must have jumped too because there was a loud crunching noise, and he got quickly off the spindly chair. An old man was standing before them, his wide, pale eyes shining like moons through the gloom of the shop. "Hello," said Harry awkwardly. "Oh, yes," said the man. Yes. I thought I'd be seeing you soon, Harry Potter." It wasn't a question. "You have your mother's eyes. It seems only yesterday she was in here herself, buying her first wand. 10 1/4 inches long, swishy, made of willow, nice wand for charm work." Mr. Ollivander moved closer to Harry. Harry wished he could blink. Those silvery eyes were a bit creepy. "Your father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand, 11 inches, pliable, a little more power, and excellent for transfiguration." "Well," I said, "your father favored it. It's really the wand that chooses the wizard, of course." Mr. Ollivander had come so close that he and Harry were almost nose to nose. Harry could see himself reflected in those misty eyes. "And that's where—" Mr. Ollivander touched the lightning scar on Harry's forehead with a long, white finger. "I'm sorry to say I sold the wand that did it," he said softly. 13 1/2 inches. You powerful wand, very powerful, and in the wrong hands. Well, if I had known what the wand was going out in the world to do." He shook his head and then, to Harry's relief, spotted Hagrid. Rubius Hagrid, how nice to see you again." "Oh, 16 inches, rather bendy, wasn't it?" "It was, sir, yes," said Hagrid. "Good wand, that one. I suppose they snapped it in half when you got expelled," said Mr. Ollivander, suddenly stern. Yes, they did, yes," said Hagrid, shuffling his feet. "I've still got the pieces, though," he added brightly. "But you don't use them," said Mr. Ollivander very sharply. "Oh, no, sir," said Hagrid quickly. Harry noticed he gripped his pink umbrella very tightly as he spoke. Said Mr. Ollivander, giving Hagrid a piercing look. "Well now, Mr. Potter, let me see." He pulled a long tape measure with silver markings out of his pocket. Which is your wand arm?" Well, I'm right-handed," said Harry. "Hold out your arm. That's it." He measured Harry from shoulder to finger, then wrist to elbow, shoulder to floor, knee to armpit, and around his head. As he measured, he said, "Every Ollivander wand has a core of a powerful magical substance, Mr. Potter. We use unicorn hairs, phoenix tail feathers, and heartstrings of dragons. No two Ollivander wands are the same. Just as no two unicorns or phoenixes are quite the same. And of course, you will never get such good results with another wizard's wand." Harry suddenly realized that the tape measure was measuring between his nostrils, was doing it on its own. Mr. Ollivander was flitting around the shelves, taking down boxes. "That will do," he said, and the tape measure crumpled into a heap on the floor. "Right then, Mr. Potter, try this one. Beechwood and dragon heartstring, 9 inches. Nice and flexible. Just take it and give it a wave." Harry took the wand and, feeling foolish, waved it around a bit, but Mr. Ollivander snatched it out of his hand almost at once. "Maple and phoenix feather, 7 inches. Quite whippy. Try this one." Harry tried, but he had hardly raised the wand when it too was snatched back by Mr. Ollivander. No, here, ebony, and a unicorn, 8 1/2 inches springy. Go on, try it." Harry tried and tried. He had no idea what Mr. Ollivander was waiting for. The pile of tried wands was mounting higher and higher on the spindly chair, but the more wands Mr. Ollivander pulled from the shelves, the happier he seemed to become. "Tricky customer, eh? Not to worry. We'll find the perfect match here somewhere. I wonder now. Yes, why not? Unusual combination, holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple." Harry took the wand. He felt a sudden warmth in his fingers. He raised the wand above his head, brought it swishing down through the dusty air, and a stream of red and gold sparks shot from the end like a firework, throwing dancing spots of light onto the walls. Hagrid whooped and clapped, and Mr. Ollivander cried, "Oh, bravo! Yes, indeed! Oh, very good! Well, well, well! How curious! How very curious!" He put Harry's wand back into its box and wrapped it in brown paper, still muttering, "Curious, curious." "Sorry," said Harry, "but what's curious?" Mr. Ollivander fixed Harry with a pale stare. "I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand gave another feather, just one other. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar." Harry swallowed. "Yes, 13.5 inches. Curious indeed how these things happen. The wand chose the wizard. Remember, I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes, but great." Harry shivered. He wasn't sure he liked Mr. Ollivander too much. He paid 7 gold galleons for his wand, and Mr. Ollivander bowed them from the shop. The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky as Harry and Hagrid made their way back down Diagon Alley, back through the wall, back through the leaky cauldron, now empty. Harry didn't speak at all as they walked down the road. He didn't even notice how much people were gawping at them on the underground, laden as they were with all their funny-shaped packages, with the sleepy, snowy owl on Harry's lap, up another escalator, out into the Paddington station. Harry only realized where they were when Hagrid tapped him on the shoulder. "Got time for a bite to eat before your train leaves," he said. He bought Harry a hamburger, and they sat down on plastic seats to eat them. Harry kept looking around. Everybody looked so strange somehow. "You all right, Harry?" "You're very quiet," said Hagrid. Harry wasn't sure he could explain. He just had the best birthday of his life, and yet he chewed his hamburger trying to find the words. "Everyone thinks I'm special," he said at last. "All those people in the leaky cauldron. Professor Quirrell, Mr. Ollivander, but I don't know anything about magic at all. How can they expect great things? I'm famous and I can't even remember what I'm famous for. I don't know what happened when the night my parents died." Hagrid leaned across the table. Behind the wild beard and eyebrows, he wore a very kind smile. "Don't worry, Harry. You'll learn fast enough. Everyone starts at the beginning at Hogwarts. You'll be just fine. Just be yourself. I know it's hard. You've been singled out, and that's always hard. But you'll have a great time at Hogwarts. I did. Still do, as a matter of fact." Hagrid helped Harry onto the train that would take him back to the Dursleys, then handed him an envelope. "Your ticket for Hogwarts," he said. "1st of September, King's Cross. It's all on your ticket. Any problems with the Dursleys, send me a letter with your owl. She'll know where to find me. See you soon, Harry." The train pulled out of the station. Harry wanted to watch Hagrid until he was out of sight. He rose in his seat and pressed his nose against the window, but he blinked and Hagrid was gone.